All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. My name is Deanna Uzarski, and I am on the marketing communications team here at Insight Partners. And we're so excited to talk about how to lay the groundwork for a great company culture. So today I am joined by my two colleagues. And before we introduce them, I just want to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items. So the session is being recorded. So if you want to share this with anyone following the presentation, we will be emailing you a link, so you can definitely share that with your team members, or if you need to leave, don't worry, we will have this available for you guys to finish watching. If you have any questions, please submit them into the chat. We're going to be addressing a bunch of the questions that our registrants submitted in advance, so thank you so much for everyone who submitted. We're super excited to go through those today. And then at the end, there is a 2-question survey, so please take that. It only takes about 30 seconds. Your feedback really helps us make sure we're giving the best content possible to all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this to our speakers to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. My name is Jeanette Jankowski. I'm the Chief People Officer in Residence here at Insight Partners. Kind of earlier in my career, I've led HR departments. Most recently, I was the CHRO for an Insight portfolio company for 9 years. We successfully exited that business in November of 21. And then in the beginning of, beginning of 22 now, my goodness, time flies. I joined Insight to help them stand up their HR advisory practice within the Talent Center of Excellence. So thrilled to be here today and kind of give some insights on some things that are near and dear to my heart, which is building culture in your companies.
Hi, all. My name is Brian Powell, and I'm the operating partner for the Talent Center of Excellence. I've been in talent for the past 25 years and worked at some very large name brand software companies. I'm excited to be here today to talk about laying the groundwork for a company culture with my partner, Jeanette Janikowski. Before we get started, let's talk about Insight and the team that helps CEOs and their executives through their growth journey. Insight is the leading scale-up software investor. We have a 25-year plus history. We have 600 primary investments plus and 90+ billion under management. But there's more that makes Insight unique. It's the on-site team. And we have 100+ ex-operators who work with our CEO and C-level executives to help them accelerate their businesses. We have deep expertise across talent, sales, marketing, product and eng, plus M&A, and that's actually cross investment segments. It's a very, very unique offering, and I'm excited to talk about the one that I manage today. I am the leader for the Center of Excellence for Talent, and we're a cross-functional team of talent and people leaders. But our alignment is around 3 areas. We focus in on executive search, our executive network, and talent and people advisory. You can see here as well, those offerings are cross-functional through diversity and inclusion. It could be compensation, et cetera. But again, we have these primaries, and then we have cross-functional talent offerings and programs. So let's talk a little bit about the market overview. It's been a very interesting few years. We saw COVID and a pandemic. We saw contraction in hiring. We then saw an acceleration in hiring in October of summer of 2020. And then it's been a very, very crazy market, right, through the past couple of years. Through that, we've seen remote, we've seen hybrid, we've seen, again, investments that we've never seen before in the number of people joining an organization. And now we have a slowdown. But as we think through this talent hiring journey, I'll go back to why we're here around what makes a great company culture. And it really starts with the CEO. The CEO is the culture maker and keeper. They are the ones who help with the artifacts that keep an organization grounded in their mission. They are the ones that are bringing strong set of values to the organization or helping craft those values. If you think about some well-known software companies, for example, like customer obsession and hire and develop the best, it's felt inside and outside the company. It's felt in their interview and selection. It's felt in how people are rewarded or recognized as inside of an organization. And it's more about that than just the functional expertise someone brings to an organization. And so I always talk about the CEO is at the center, right? Talent is at the center of everything, but the CEO is the culture maker in an organization. Next slide. So as our strategy one is to create a thoughtful and hiring strategy, I want to talk about a few points here. So always talk about be thoughtful, right? Take time to create a thoughtful hiring strategy. I've been fortunate enough to be in some hyper growth companies, and I've seen where we're hiring across the board in every location, and there's not a lot of rhyme or reason around how we're hiring. And it actually impacted us quite a lot in 2022. And so I always tell people is like, think about the asset that you're bringing into the organization. Take time to be thoughtful. Take time to think about when you need those hires and what skill sets are needing in those. Look beyond your network as well. This is a big one, right? I mean, if your early days, you have a small circle of people that you know very well, and you bring them into an organization, and you're starting to think through like, how do you create a more diverse or inclusive environment, and bringing in other skill sets, right, or other people that are outside of that immediate circle. And so I always tell people, it's like referrals are great, but also think about how you can expand that, expand your radius of talent, and how do you get to that talent and bring them to your organization. We talk about culture add versus fit, and this is really around bringing those values into the interview and selection process as well, right? I mean, that's where I've seen it work firsthand is when you bring those values in, you're thinking about things in a very different way. And I'll use an example. I was at a startup company, and we were going through hyper growth, and ambiguity was something that we weren't thinking about, but that was actually a culture add for us. And so we were thinking, okay, we pivoted and said, okay, let's think about the questions we're asking people to really focus on ambiguity, and can people operate in that kind of environment? And it became an accelerant as well for us and the type of people we were hiring. The final piece is really around being transparent with candidates. I think about as well, when we came into COVID, I was talking about the market overview. I was in an environment where we were receiving about 35,000 resumes per quarter. And all of a sudden through COVID, we were receiving 150,000 resumes per quarter. And I remember talking to the talent team and said, okay, we have to figure out quickly how to humanize this experience, because we have a lot of people who are potential promoters of our brand and our company. And there's this thing where I've always said to my teams is like, every candidate is a customer, every candidate or customer is a candidate. And you never ever know when that interaction is going to happen. And so you have to be very transparent with people through the process. But it's also when you see things happen inside your organization, communication is key. And so I always talk about humanizing. Let's humanize the experience for people who are candidates, and humanize the experience for our employees as well. And that is actually a differentiator in the market that a lot of people don't do. You hear about ghosting, you hear about people not getting responses on the opportunities that are out there. And that's why I said, if I can hit home on anything, is really around humanizing the experience with candidates through this process.
Brian, thank you for walking us through all of those key points. And I think what's really going to drive these home is picking on some of those questions that we got submitted by a registrant. So I want to go back to the focus on culture add versus fit. One of the questions we got is, what do you use in your interviewing process to determine if this candidate is an appropriate fit after you've determined they have the skills to do the job?
As I said earlier, it's not about fit, it's more about a value add, right? And this is where we saw that you can do functional questions, and then adding the values, company values, and having a really set of good behavioral interview questions that do balance the both of functional expertise and values, and that value add, right, to the organization. And that's how we started getting outside of fit, because I didn't want it to be a gut feeling. I didn't want it to be that someone makes a quick decision within the first 30 seconds of meeting someone, because that's a lot of times in interviewing happens. It was really around asking a broad set of questions, putting those values out there, and then segmenting as well who on the interview panel was going to take those values. And then a big one is actually when you do the debrief and you come together and you talk about the functional alignment, and you also talk about those values in that debrief. That's where I think the magic happens, and bringing really added, bringing those value added hires to the organization. I don't know, Jeanette, I think I could over you if you've seen anything as well.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said, right? What we most important kind of as you're building the culture is to just, look beyond your network, like number two says, and then figure out who are going to be the people that are going to continue to enable your culture to grow versus just continue to have the same culture, because your culture will modify itself over time as the company scales, as the company grows, and as it heads into different levels of maturity. And so those are the types of things you're going to want to look at in your hires, as well as because you're those people then are going to continue to foster the culture that the folks that are going to come on that journey with you are going to do as well.
And we have another question here I want to bring up, which this is definitely a hot hot button issue, right? The question is, I'd love to hear any thoughts and or advice you have for distributed and hybrid teams.
Yeah, I'll go.
Let's go ahead and start with start with you.
Yes, I'll hop in here. So this is probably one of the, of the 5 topics that we get kind of from HR departments or CEOs is, what do I do now? I want to bring my folks back to the office. How do I build culture in a distributed environment? What am I going to do? Because I'm never going to have we hired remotely during COVID, so I'm never going to have everybody back in the same office. And there's no one right answer. I will say that I think we are starting to see more of the focus on some time in the office. There's a lot of group of people that say, I don't want to ever come back to the office. And then there's the friction of those that were hired remotely that don't live within the geography of the office and says, well, how come I have to be in the office if somebody who lives in Iowa, for instance, doesn't have to come to the office? And so there's no one strategy. I will tell you that a distributed workforce doesn't necessarily drive the culture bad or good. That we have lots of companies that are completely remote and have always been completely remote and have a fantastic culture. We also have some that were fully in office and went full remote and are really struggling, and they feel like that connection to the company and that connection to their fellow coworkers is struggling because people just aren't in, and we're lacking innovation. We're lacking that human connection that we make. And so I think, like everything else in your business, and I always say to folks, your people are a strategy. You've got a marketing strategy, you've got a product strategy, you've got your tech strategy. Well, your people are a strategy as well. And you should think about what is that strategy and then back into the things that you have to do to get to that end, just like you do your product strategy or your event strategy. We want to go to 18 events this year. Let's pick all of all the events we want to do. These are the 6 that we think are most important. This is where we're going to start. Your people are the exact same way. So think about, what is the strategy? What do you want when people talk about your company as an employee? What do you want them to say? And when you get there, now be honest with yourself about what they're really saying. And then how do you bridge that gap to the extent that there is one?
Yeah, I think also there's thinking about some of the actions, your people are on Zoom and some people are in the room, right? And when you have this hybrid model as well around being inclusive of the populations you have and where their locations are, right? And so you have to be very intentional with these things. You think about how you communicate, right? You can always say, oh, well, I'm going to do it this way. It's all hands in person. But what about the people who aren't actually in your location, right? And so, I think more and more with workforces that are distributed, multiple offices, et cetera, you're going to have people all over, but you just have to be very intentional and being very inclusive on like how you communicate and how you interact with them. That's a big one that, we've talked about over and over again. It's like, we're not all going to be in the office all the time, right? We have people traveling on business. It's like, how do we keep them included as well in a meeting, right? And all hands as an example. And so, yeah, you have to be very intentional.
Yeah, I love that. I know something we had talked about when we were looking at the content for this webinar is definitely about making that concerted effort to create a culture. It's a strategy that you have to have a plan behind, right? It's not just going to happen. So I love all of that. We actually got one question come in that I think is a really good question while you guys were chatting. What happens if you hire someone and 1 week in, you find out or you realize they're not the right fit? How do you handle this? It says the person joined from another company without giving sufficient time to perform. It seems very unfair. Based on the first brief interaction, it's clear this person is not a good fit. What do you do? Brian, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, I'll let you.
Give me the hard question.
I would fall into my camp, I suppose. Look, I say, it's funny. I was just on the phone with a founder CEO this morning, and I said, make sure that you take the time to really assess. Make sure that you didn't have some vision in your mind of what this person was going to do or who they were going to be. That if they come in and they're not exactly what you had in your mind, that you don't think that, well, they're probably not gonna work out. That being said, generally, if this early on you think I probably made a bad hire, you're probably right. Very infrequently when hiring managers and or executives will come to me and say, like, I realize now this is probably just the wrong thing, make the change. I mean, I think there's ways that you can delicately exit the person from your business, because you are still, to Brian's point, like, you are still trying to manage your brand. And so I think it's important. They did leave a job and they came to your job. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at that exit delicately, but just keeping them on for the sake of keeping them on potentially will damage the rest of the folks in that department. And you don't want to do that either, right? So, don't second guess yourself. Certainly don't keep them on just because, well, I want to be fair or whatever. If you've really decided that and you've used critical criteria in order to do that, I think that's the most important thing. Like, make sure that the criteria that you're using to determine the fact that they're not going to be the right fit is one that is defensible, right? Because you're always as well looking out for, the legal risk of your organization. But if that's the case, I'd say work with your HR department and figure out how do we delicately make a transition out of the business for this person, and then be more intentional on, kind of the after the fact Monday morning quarterback to say, what questions did we not ask in the interview process, or what skill set did we not realize we needed, or what was this person's biggest gap, to make sure that you're smarter than when you re-recruit this person the next time, that you don't fall into that same problem.
And then I think we have time for one more question, which we also just received. Can you share thoughts on recruiting and, more importantly, integrating non-founder executives? There still seems to be a gap between keeping the company quote unquote young, yet having seasoned leaders to scale the company.
Yeah,
Jenna, do you want to? Okay.
I was just trying to think through, I think about like hiring engineers as an example, right? I mean, it's a tough market. It doesn't matter if it's a down market or an up market, it's always a tough one, right? I mean, hiring an executive is one thing. But you're talking about your key middle layer, right? I mean, you've got managers and you've got individual contributors there. But I think, like I said before, is having that set of values, right? That if you're set in values and you've got good questions there, it doesn't matter, someone's seasoned or not, right? I mean, you're bringing these valuable adds to your organization, right? That are going to help drive your business regardless of how much years of experience. I mean, if someone's customer obsessed, right? I mean, that's a big thing, right? To help drive your organization, and you want that. So that, I don't know if it's about keeping keeping it young, but it's keeping it focused on the values that are important to your organization at the executive level or even at the individual contributor level. I mean, I hope that answers the question, but like, it just feels like to me, like, if you really ground on the values, they're timeless, right? Regardless of the experience level. I mean, that's the biggest thing I would say.
Yeah, and I just add, similarly, like everything else that we're going to talk about today, the makeup of your company, whether it's geographic or experience level, is hopefully deliberate, right? Hopefully you're looking for different levels of experience in different jobs, because with those become, kind of that cross-cultural fit that you're looking for. But I do think you have to recognize that, generational gaps are real, and what different people in their career or different people in the periods of their life are looking for are different. And so as you start to blend those things together, you have to make sure that your culture is evolving to allow for that. So, if you like to do things that are more geared towards a younger population, meaning, earlier on in their career, understand that some of the folks that are more seasoned, might not be looking for that, or folks that have young children, for instance, might not be looking to stay in the office till 10 o'clock every night and hang out with their peer group because they've got children to take care of, or they've got other responsibilities in their life. So I think as you broaden the horizons and you broaden the experience levels of the folks that you're bringing in, you have to be deliberate about how you're going to evolve the culture of your organization to make sure that you are inclusive of what everyone's needs are, both personally and professionally, as they continue to grow in their life and in their careers, so that you're not isolating anyone or making someone feel like, oh, I just don't fit in there. I don't fit into that culture.
Thank you both for for those answers. And I do want to just go back really quickly to the hybrid setup because we got another question here. It says follow-up question on hybrid setup. Can you share some practical examples from your experience? What works or doesn't work for a hybrid team to build personal relations and company culture? So maybe if each of you could provide an example, I think that would be really great to address this. Brian, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think we like the value add to candidates, right, that come to Insight. I would say like ambiguity is one that I talked about as well a minute ago. It's because, when you're going into a startup environment, having people who don't need the operating manual, right, to always to be able to do something, they're going to figure it out, right? They're using their general sort of knowledge and experience, right, to figure these big problems out, and they're super helpful, I think, in any software company, right, and especially the companies at Insight. Always like to think about like bias for action as well, right? Action oriented folks being able to get in the mix and get things done are super important. I talk about the customer piece of it is thinking about the customers, internal and external customers. I mean, these things are super important as well, right? These are values that I think that make Insight unique and also can help our portfolio companies as well in bringing that. There's just one like just top of mind, right, that I think about. I don't know, share Jeanette if there's any others as well.
I will say one thing that doesn't work anymore: no more Zoom happy hours. I feel like we Zoom happy hours to death. And I think in the moment they were a good idea. I think people just got sick of them. But I will say, the thing that I advise portfolio companies on to try to build that human connection in a remote environment is try to schedule in, and like nobody needs another Zoom meeting scheduled, but try to schedule in time where there's no agenda, right? Right now, all communications are deliberate. The people that you're talking to are deliberate by invite, and the conversations you're having are deliberate around whatever the agenda is for that meeting. And so, periodically, cross-functionally, just dump some time on the calendar where, it could be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just, hey, tell me about this, or, what I said, the thing that you lose in a remote environment is kind of walking around the office and you see prom pictures and you realize someone's, child went to the prom or graduation or whatever. You don't get to see that. You don't get to see that other side. And so if we make less deliberate interactions, you have the ability to just be a little bit more relaxed. And, the agenda is tell me a fun fact about yourself, or things that just are not business. It takes the kind of water cooler talk, if you will, that we used to do, that we've tried to replicate on Slack, but then that gets noisy, so people mute those. And I think I still think it's worth it to have time where you're just meeting people that you haven't met and you're just trying to get to know them as people, which is what we used to do when you're standing in the lunchroom and you'd put your stuff in the microwave or whatever, right? I think that's what we have to now try to replicate in this very deliberate and very remote environment.
Here I am answering the question that hasn't been asked yet. I mean, Jeanette's talking about, yes, the hybrid, and I'm going around to the next Q&A. I apologize. I'm sort of looking at the questions and answering the question that was in front of me. So maybe I jumped ahead around the value added candidates we bring to Insight. So
Okay, thanks. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move to our next topic here. Strategy number 2, which is communicate with complete transparency. And I think in some ways we've touched on that a little bit. And then Jeanette, if you could help us with some of these key points, I think that's the step.
Sure. So the most important takeaway here, and again, things that I advise, founders, early CEOs, or even, people who are just starting their HR leadership careers, communication has to be deliberate, especially now in a remote environment. It has to be deliberate. And you have to think about what it is you want to communicate. I will tell you that employees are becoming much more savvy. And it's probably because, with the rise of social media, we have what appears to be kind of an in view of what's going on at a lot more companies, right? Just because there's things on TikTok, there's things on Instagram, whatever, all over the place. And you're like, oh, that happened at that company, that happened at that company. So, and as we continue to build out our own personal networks, you get understanding of my CEO does this, or my leadership team communicates this way. And that makes people realize, it's not just I work at IBM, or I work at, one of the big pharma companies. There were 6 companies, 50 years ago that everybody wanted to work for. Now you want to work for the company that treats you like a human being and that trusts you as part of that business. And I think with that, what that means is they expect you to be honest with them. And, I've spoken to founders and CEOs who say like, well, I don't necessarily want to burden my employees with the bad stuff. I just want to tell them all of the good stuff. Well, life isn't all rainbows and unicorns, and people know that, right? Because it's just not real life. And so employees will respond favorably and will have a positive opinion of your company if they feel like they're being treated like adults and they're being included in those communications and in that information. And with the good comes the bad. What will allow you to do is it'll allow you to really celebrate the wins and then really focus on the things that maybe you didn't do as well and get consensus within your organization of any ideas, guys, how we can help fix this, or any ideas what we should do to make this better, or we were really disappointed with the performance of this product, but we're excited because with this potential failure came all of the ideas of what we're going to do next. So roadblocks in your organizations are not necessarily a negative thing. And we certainly saw that, as a lot of our portfolio companies in the late summer of last year started to pivot to maybe interest rates rising and the kind of tightening of the credit market was going to make us need to keep our cash runway longer. And so what does that mean? Well, so companies that had kind of grown at all costs were now really looking at operationally, how did they get more effective? And so that was a pivot for the company. It wasn't a bad pivot. And I think those companies whose culture survived some of those changes that they had to go through at the end of last year were those that really explained, here's the thoughtful way that we think about our business. Here's the way we think about what our business is going to be. And we want you to be all on this journey with us. So we're going to share it with you. So, the takeaways for communication, and it's no different internally than when you think about the communication that you're going to do externally. We have a whole marketing teams that think every day about what do we want our brand to be? What do we want the view of our company to be? You should be just as deliberate out. What do we want our brand to be internally? Your employer brand, and Brian will talk about this in recruiting, but your employer brand is important as you try to attract outside talent into your business. It's also really important to keep the culture of your existing employees. So be deliberate, be transparent, and be honest. People will respond to honesty because they get it.
Brian, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's spot on. Jeanette hit the high points. She knows this well. Like we've talked it over and over and over again about, how to elevate help elevate the people function, and helps elevate, right, the C-level or the CEO as well when it comes to these type of things. So yeah, Jeanette hits it right on the head.
Perfect. Well, I want to go into some of the audience submitted questions, and I really love this one. Are there any examples of bad company culture getting turned around? If so, please share what worked. Jeanette, can you help us with this one?
Yeah, I think so, right? I'm an eternal optimist. That's why I chose the profession I chose. But nothing is ever fatal in any business for the most part. I guess maybe a couple of things are, but we'll keep it positive. So absolutely, you can turn it around. It's hard, right? Certainly, your culture degrading happens easier than I think the build back up, but it certainly can. And it goes back to what we said about having a deliberate strategy. It's hard. And you really have to, once your culture kind of goes a little bit south, it takes real work to get it back, to get it back to what it was. And the only way to get it back there is to get your employees to trust the business. It's the only way to build a better culture, right? There's not a piece of tchotchke stuff that you can send out, or there's not a tagline, or there's not, and it's not necessarily okay, we're going to make new vision and value statements. Those are important, they're important foundations, but equally as important is living them, because just putting them on the wall and then having your employees say, well, you're tone deaf, because that's not really what this company is about. You say that we're about this, but we're really about that. So it's more important about actually living the things that you say you want to be, and helping get the employees to trust you, and getting them to understand that we really want to be better. We understand this is where we are. We get lots of questions about what to do about Glassdoor. We've got all these negative things on Glassdoor. What can we do about Glassdoor? And I say, the first thing you should do about Glassdoor is really take in what they're saying. Now, am I also realistic enough to know that, everything that's on Glassdoor isn't true? Yes, it's someone's perspective, but it's someone's perspective, right? So you can agree or disagree with them, but at the end of the day, it was someone who felt strong enough about their opinion about your company to go and put it on a pretty public platform for everybody to see. So you can't just write it off and say, oh, that person was crazy or that person is disgruntled. Yes. Are there those people? 100%. And should you take to heart every single word that's written there about your company? No, but you certainly should continue to look for themes, because if there's themes in those, there's probably some thread of, maybe we should start to think about this and maybe we should do something differently because multiple people are feeling the same way. And so you can turn it around, but you have to address it. Just hiding from it or saying like, we're just going to not talk about it and hope that over time it goes away. It's going to be much more difficult to rebuild it that way.
Yeah, you have to be very, very intentional in the change, right? And when you see something, because others talk about like truth is in the middle, right? Because there's both sides, but there's always truth somewhere in the middle. And especially with Glassdoor or even something like Blind, where it's even more raw, or those comments, you really need to start thinking through. It's like, okay, gosh, like maybe our communication is better. How are we doing things? How did we do a layoff? Did we do it in a way that was human? I said this earlier, right? How do you humanize the experience? Think about if you were on the other side of that and how would it feel to you? Getting an email in the middle of the night, right, may not be optimal, but again, sometimes some companies have done an exceptional job, right, with communication or how they're even communicating bad news. And so just think through that, right? Think about the human side of things. That helps, right? I think land the culture or earn the trust as well with folks.
And I want to go on to one of our other questions here, which we actually received a couple of along this theme in advance from our audience, which is how does the culture change and evolve as the company grows? So how do you scale culture along with the company?
I think
Do you want to kick us off?
I think the hardest thing about scaling culture is it goes from, Brian said earlier when we started this, kind of the CEO is the center of the culture. They set what they want the culture to be, and it goes and it kind of goes out from there. As your company scales, you need to start to lean on other leaders. And so you have to make sure that you're aligned at a leadership level and even then another level down, because the CEO is not going to be able to have that same level of intimate engagement with all of the employees as the employee base grows, as they did when they were 20 employees. You hear all the time, when we were 20 employees, we sat in one room and we all knew everything that was going on. And then as you scale, by definition, things start to become more siloed because you just have more people and you've now got these functional leaders focused on what it is they have to do every day. And so your communication needs to become more deliberate, and you have to understand how are we going to make sure that we keep positive energy? How are we going to make sure that we keep those values that are core to the business continuing to waterfall down to all of the employees? And it is kind of a waterfall, right? So the CEO has to make sure that they're very deliberate in making sure the leadership team is all on board, make sure the leadership team agrees. Does the leadership team believe that the company is really living the values that it says it has and living the culture that it thinks it has? And then from that level down, how are they managing to cascade that down to their managers? Because those folks really become the culture makers of your organization as you grow. It becomes, while the core is still set at the CEO, it becomes then all of your middle level managers. And as I've said to lots of people before, like the thing that worries me the most about kind of the last 3 years of everyone being this distributed work is you learn to be a good manager, or you learn to be the manager you don't want to be, kind of the way you learn to be a parent, right? Like as much as we joke and I say, like when I had children, I was never going to say the things that my mom said, but guess what? Like I say the things my mom said. And when you become a manager, you think about all the people that managed you before, or you think about the people that you experience that you don't want to be like when you're a manager. And so in this remote environment, people aren't getting to see different management styles. So we have to be more deliberate in giving those folks the tools as we continue to, promote people and elevate people and escalate people in their careers who for the last 3 years might not have been in the physical environment with someone else. And, their experiences have been with their manager or maybe one other. How do we make sure that we're giving them the skills to understand what does that mean? How do we teach them to be culture advocates of the organization? Because it's not just a skill that necessarily innately comes. It is one that has to be deliberately taught as well.
Yeah, I think I said earlier, right, around the values. And again, there's a very large software company that has very strong leadership principles. And those things have carried through, right, from when they were very, very small to now being, right, I think there's 1 million employees. I mean, those things they have scaled with them, right, because they've been embedded in the organization from very early days. This is what I was talking about, artifacts as well, right? These artifacts that help as well rally the organization around. Again, I talk about customer obsession. I mean, you work for a company that gave a straitjacket for people who were fanatical about customers. But that was an artifact that like stayed with them from being very, very small to very large. And so, that is, like I said, as a CEO, you should be thinking about that, right? It's like, what am I doing, right, to make sure that those artifacts stay and they live on? They're living and breathing in the organization. Like Jeanette said earlier, right? They can't be a logo on the wall or a banner, because it feels like very office space to me. That doesn't work, right? I mean, those things don't resonate with people. They need to see it in the action and the rewards as well around those values and behaviors. That's what takes an organization right through that transition of being small to large. Right. And I think that, like you said, you reward people based on the values that they're showing every day. I think it's an important piece of that. And recognize them for that.
And we're still getting a bunch of questions, so I'm going to see how many of these we can get through. So continuing with this theme of creating transparency with communication, one of the questions is, what are good actions a CEO can follow in the daily business to create the right narrative, share the strategy, and give transparency? What are good formats for the team?
I mean, I worked previously with a CEO. I thought did a great job with their all hands, right? I mean, he did an amazing job introducing all the new people joining the organization, right? And he walked through, again, customer stories, new logos, et cetera. And then as we then matured and had a really seasoned CFO as well, like walking through the finance, like just was very transparent about the growth of the business and what was happening. I mean, that's a big one, right? I mean, just having regular all hands, but thinking about that, these key business drivers and making sure everyone's aligned to them is like, what you're focused on, and then how you're achieving against them is super important. And that's the way I have found, right, where it starts building trust as one mechanism to help right build that environment.
Yeah, I agree. I think all hands are fantastic. I also think the Ask Me Anythings are a great mechanism. And now the Ask Me Anythings can get a little scary depending on where your culture is currently sitting. And I think, you have to have the managerial and executive courage to say, I'm going to answer the questions. So ask me a question. I'm not going to give you confidential information, obviously. Like you can't say, tell me what Joe's performance review was last quarter. That's obviously not something you're going to answer. But outside of, specific confidential information that just can't be shared for lots of legal reasons, I think you need to be prepared to answer the hard questions if you're asked them, because that is what's going to eventually say to people, they trust me enough to treat me like an adult in this business. And I think that's what folks are looking for today. Like folks are looking for a place that they can feel like they belong and they can feel like they're trusted like an adult professional. And so I think that's what you have to strive for. But I think all hands, in the absence of again anybody being in the same place, all hands are great. I know for we have lots of companies that are so geographically dispersed, they're global, and so you're talking about 8:00 in the morning is in the middle of the night for somebody else. And so to the extent that you can pivot and the leadership team can make the time for them in their own time zone, I also think goes a long way. Like I think that we find in our global companies where the CEOs say, well, I'm going to do this one at 10:00 at night on the East Coast because it's better for my employees in Asia, for instance. That goes a long way to help those employees feel like they're actually part of the company. Not that if I want to be part of this company's culture, I have to live on New York City time, that kind of thing. And so that just goes into the same consistent theme of deliberate about what you're trying to say. What is the message you're trying to get across? And it's not just the message of what you're saying, it's the message about how important your employees are to the success of your organization.
I mean, it could be onboarding, right, as well. I mean, you have an onboarding day if it's once a month or once a week. I mean, you can do that as well, where the CEO or a C-level executive getting very involved in the onboarding. I mean, it does pay dividends, right? Because they hear you, they see from you, and they know that this matters to them. Their day one, right? Matters a lot because it does help hopefully accelerate their onboarding as well in the company. Slack, I mean, you'd be surprised, right? Or some sort of communication, right? That's outside of email, where you can send messages and be able to give updates, et cetera. And it feels real time to folks, right? And giving them that forum as well to ask more questions. Yeah, I think about there's a lot of like forums that you can use that are really lightweight and they don't take a ton of time to be able to get the communication piece that or reiterate the values, right, or what you see as the vision or the things that are important to you out there. So I've seen them all work, right? I mean, they are effective.
Yeah, and actually, Jeanette, you touched on one of our last questions here, which is, can you speak to building culture across borders and global culture? So I love your example about, moving those times to accommodate other people in different time zones. Are there any other examples, maybe, Brian, we can start with you, that work well with building culture across borders?
Yeah, I mean, this is where, you have to think global, not local. I think it's very, very easy, right? If you're in the United States, to think that this is the way business is done, right? Everywhere else in the world. And there is some cultural norms and differences. And so just being thoughtful about that and how you communicate. Because what I found in the past is a word that we use here may be very different, right, somewhere else. And so you just have to be, again, thoughtful about the words and be intentional with how you're going to communicate, when you're going to communicate. That's a big one. And so if you always wear this mindset or this hat of, I'm going to think global, not local, right? I always tell people this story. I remember, I moved to Munich, Germany, and I was in Finland and I was talking to my team. And I remember the first thing they said to me is, okay, tell us what we need to do. And I said, well, I don't know what you do. So why don't you sit and tell me about your business? Tell me about the things that you're working on. And then I can come back to you at a different time. And when I left that meeting, I remember someone walked up to me and said, oh, wow, I was expecting you to be, like a typical American, just to tell me what I should be doing next. And I said, well, no, like, I don't know what the cultural norms are. I don't know how you all do it here. And so I want to learn from you first before I come back to you with, hey, this is how you should do things. And so, again, I always try to tell people, it's like, hey, think global, not local. And that helps a ton, I think, as well, earning trust outside of the US, as an example, if you're a US-based company.
Yeah, I agree. I think having someone that you can trust in those localities to let you know some of the, kind of some of the norms of those cultures is super important. And you can read books on different cultures and, business professional norms in those cultures. You can't replicate having someone to say, hey, this is the way things really work in the tech world in Germany, for instance, or whatever. And so I think it is important, as your entire leadership team should make sure that they are consistently, keeping up to speed on what's going on in those countries. What is the professional norms in those countries, so that you don't, again, go back to looking tone deaf, or to Brian's point, if you're an American located company, looking like you're just another American, which we can hear a lot.
Okay, so with the last 15, let's move on to our third strategy we're going to discuss today, which is outsourcing people operations to strategic HR partners. And I'm going to pass it to Jeanette to go through our key points.
Yeah, sure. So this one's a little more tactical. The others have been a little more strategic, obviously. And so, this is, as a company is scaling, and it's one of the things that we see certainly in our companies in multiple stages. You go from, I hired a bunch of people and I have to pay them, to, okay, what should my people and culture strategy be, right? That's kind of the life cycle, if you will, of a formal HR department. And the things that you need are different. And I think, don't underestimate building earlier what you think you might need later, because what we see is, we see that, kind of in the beginning, everybody's like, all right, I need a PEO, I need to outsource my payroll, and I need to provide these people with benefits. And then I need somebody who's maybe going to do an org structure or maybe do some training. So maybe I hire, or I need a recruiter, right? How many of our startup companies, their head of HR really was their recruiter because it was the only person that had any HR knowledge. And so, start to think about the things that you need in your organization from a strategic perspective and the things that you need from an operational perspective. A lot of the operational stuff, at least in the early stages, can be outsourced, but that it shouldn't be in place of the strategy that you're going to want to set. And if you're not ready to hire, kind of your first strategic HR thinker, if you will, you can also outsource that. There are companies out there that will help you build your HR strategy, same as you build your marketing strategy, product roadmap, all of those other things. And so, this is just the key points here are, think about what you have to get done because you have employees and there are certain things that you just regulatory or statutory, or you want to offer benefits. But then also on the other side of that, think about what company do I want to become? And that needs a deliberate people strategy. And so if you're not ready yet to hire that person onto your team, try to find that skill set externally the same way you would look for the person that's going to run your payroll, because it is equally as important. It is much more, like we talked about earlier, it was much more difficult to change a bad culture than it is to just institute a really good one from the beginning. And it's one of those things. And again, especially in startup environments where you're thinking really about the product and the customer, that can get lost. And it's not a skill set that necessarily is innate in every person. So you can't just assume that everyone that you hire that's going to be part of your leadership team is going to be good at this. It is something that you have to think about deliberately. So if you don't hire it in-house, that's fine. But then, try to find it externally, someone that'll help give you pointers on how to establish your culture early.
I mean, Jenna and I talked about this before around like the people function as well as being that business partner to you. And so if you're a CEO and you're thinking about like, what is really good a people function look like, is thinking about that people leader that is truly your right hand, your trusted advisor, right? It isn't about just setting up benefits as an example, right? I mean, that's pretty easy to do, right? And it's not complex, but having that person who can guide you and advise you through challenging or even easy people stuff, but just to have that to be there, it really elevates the function as well, because it isn't just all the transactional, right? I mean, it's not, and that's where we both have seen the power of the people function as well when you're thinking about hiring business-minded HR or talent leaders into your organization. That can help, like, as you grow, especially early stage, they set this very solid foundation for you to build on, versus, being 1,000-person company and having to tear down the foundation to rebuild it. Because I think Jeanette and I both have personally seen that, right? Where we have to come in and rebuild an organization.
It's much easier to set it the first time than rebuild
Yep.
it. I can promise you that.
Yes.
So one of our audience submitted questions is, do founders take the time to do real onboarding of new staff? Not just telling them where the restrooms are located, but serious onboarding, 6 months of expectations. In my experience, this assists to level the results expectations right up front, so the new candidate can hit the ball. What are your thoughts?
I think this is a differentiator. It's funny. I was on the phone with a founder this morning who's about to bring their first chief product officer on. And we talked a lot about, how do I set this person up for success? And I think you have to, and it all, I mean, this is a factor of time, right? And I want to certainly respect the fact that founders and CEOs of early stage companies have a million things going on. They're wearing 6 hats because they're not hiring all of those positions because they're getting their companies off the ground. And so, but these are the places where I think we can underestimate, as the founder, we can underestimate how hard it is to integrate into a new company, and how hard it is, and how much institutional knowledge is in the minds of the people that were there from day one. So I think it is really important to onboard correctly. And I think it's important to allow your new hire to experience every function. And what I've always said to folks is, generally what we do is we bring the new person in, they meet for the first, 2 hours with the boss, the CEO, whoever it is. And we say, oh, so glad you're here. We've got this, and this. And then we set you up with, an hour-long meeting of everybody. really a more effective way to do it is have that new hire sit in on meetings that are already scheduled in each one of those functions. Let them see how those teams interact with one another. Let them hear what those teams are talking about versus just, okay, we're going to talk for an hour, we're going to get to know each other, and then I'm going to probably walk away as the new hire, and I'm still not really sure. I might not remember your name. I'm not exactly sure what all is in your function. And then 3 months later, I'm going to have to come back and ask you these questions again because it was too much information in the first 2 weeks when you're literally trying to figure out where the bathroom is, right? And so I do think onboarding is very important, certainly at the senior level and certainly in founder-led early stage companies, because there's a lot they're trying to absorb, and they're trying to do it fast because we all know those move quickly. So I guess the answer to the question is, do people still do it? I think they do. I certainly recommend it's a best practice, and they should. And I think they should put a lot of thought into what that first, kind of 2-3 weeks looks like. And it's not just checking the box to say, okay, I know you spoke to this person, this person, this person, because speaking to people without context of what they're doing or where they fit in the organization or what they're going to want from you or you're going to want from them isn't necessarily that helpful.
Yeah. You put them on they're on the wild goose chase to find the pattern recognition, right? And it's hard. It's super hard. You're right. Spot on.
So they get a couple of questions that we received earlier. We actually received a couple that were along these lines. It's asking about resources to become a better CEO. So do you have any specific book recommendations, workshop, or seminars? Obviously, the ScaleUp CEO series is my recommendation, or even leadership trainings that you guys would recommend.
I mean, like a book that, there's a couple, right? Lead Yourself First is one. It's great. I mean, there's this moment of like leadership, and as well, getting the time just when you're making big decisions to think through those big decisions, right? So time, and it really talks about that. So Lead Yourself First is one that I always reference, try to give to people. And the other is Good to Great. I mean, like it's timeless, right? There's a lot of little nuggets in there that I think can help any leader, any CEO as well. So those are the two.
Yeah, my favorite is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's just a kind of an interesting perspective on the things that you think are hard and what actually are the hard things, and how those things come together and how you should be deliberate and think about those things. I think the common themes in all of them are, you have to take time as a early stage founder CEO to think about the business as the business, right? And think about it outside of the product and the financials and the customers, which is what we can get to overcome with, because that's the meat of the business, right? You have to take a step back every once in a while and look at your business from the outside, and really kind of assess, where is it? Where was it? Where do I want it to go? And how do I get it there? And I think that's you have to take the time to be deliberate about those things, or it's going to go in a direction that you might not be able to control, or that you might not want it to go into.
And I want to go through one more question. I know we're at about time here. It's from the perspective of B2B companies. One of the biggest challenges to healthy college culture is misalignment across teams, marketing and sales specifically. Since PE VC priorities are growth and profitability, how have you seen Insight companies build cultures of alignment? Jeanette, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I think, yeah, that's a tough one, because you're right. It is, I should say, it was growth and profitability. I think in different stages of different companies, it's different things. But, I think you want to make sure that, and this is easier said than done, I appreciate something that we had in the business that I was the head of HR for 9.5 years on. I think you have to figure out the synergies between those organizations, right? There is healthy friction. And I say to folks all the time, like, some level of friction is healthy in an organization. It keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you, there was a speaker that I listened to once that said, like, find your catfish, right? And if anybody knows what catfish, they're the kind of bottom feeders, and they pick on other fish, and they make you, and they kind of take the nastiness off of other fish. So find the person that's going to kind of keep picking at you to make you better. And so some healthy friction is good. When that starts to turn dysfunctional, then it's obviously you have to get involved in it. But that's where your leadership team really needs to be aligned, that they're making sure, because your leadership team hopefully is the epitome of your cross-functional team. Like, hopefully they're meeting frequently and they know what's going on and they've got a good pulse what's going on in the organization. And so that's where you have to make sure that you're aligned. And then those folks can help bring the people underneath them kind of in line with making sure that everybody's goals are the same and making sure that the salespeople aren't frustrated because they say, I don't have any product to sell, or I'm not closing enough deals because marketing's not getting me enough leads, and all of those things that we know, kind of if we went that way kind of thing that can happen in companies. So I think it's hard. I think it can be done. I think your leadership team really has to be aligned. And I think your leadership team has to trust one another, and they all have to understand what your North Star is.
And I think, we talk about our on-site team. Our sales and marketing team to come in and help as well, right? You can see that those collaboration and culture between the on-site team and the things that they do, and then they bring that into the organization as well. And so, when you have ex-operators who work effectively together, like I believe we do on the on-site center of excellence, that's a way of opportunity, like using that collaboration to help bring some of that inside of our portfolio companies as well, if there's a need. So, I see it happen all the time where our COEs work very, very closely together. Product, sales, and marketing, and then you add talent in there where we're all collaboratively working together across. And then that can help bring that into an organization as well.
And we are coming right up on time here. So before we all drop off, I just want to say thank you to our registrants, everyone who attended today. Thank you so much for submitting all of your questions. I think this was a really awesome conversation. I know I learned something today. I hope you all did too. And thank you so much to our hosts, Jeanette and Brian, for taking us through this conversation. As a quick reminder, this was recorded, so you'll get a link to this following the webinar. And please take that quick survey. We would love to hear your guys' feedback and suggestions. And keep an eye out for future sessions with our ScaleUp CEO series. We'll be bringing more insights to you guys. Thank you, everyone.